Grand opening, grand closing. Welcome, my friends, my family, my fellow gamers. Your only friend is YouTube Streets Porter77 back with another video. So, topic of the day is interview with PlayStation CEOs Hideaki Nishino and Herman Holtz. Right? If you didn't know already, PlayStation now has two CEOs, vice the traditional one. I think Sony realized PlayStation is a little bit big, so they separated pivotal roles, right? So Mr. Nishino, he's responsible for the hardware and I think the networking side. So he's the CEO of that portion of PlayStation, while Herman Holtz is responsible for like the third party, first party games and IPs and all that other stuff aside of PlayStation, right? So I guess that's how they're able to keep up to pace and keep up technologies. This is from Variety magazine, so you could go to their website. I'll post a link in the description box if you want to read the whole interview. But they talked about a couple of things, right? One thing they talked about, and Mr. Nishino, he's the one that answered the question, was about the whole PS5 Pro, and he mentioned that the PS4 Pro was actually 20% of the sales of PlayStation 4 was the PlayStation 4 Pro, which is a little bit higher than the 15% a lot of people assumed. All right, so that's interesting. So now we know 20% of the PlayStation PS4 console sales were the PS4 Pro, and that PS4 Pro also drove in new users, like new gamers that bought a PlayStation 4. They bought the PS4 Pro. Now he didn't say exactly how many or what was the percentage of that, but he did say that did happen, right? Now, one thing that's being talked about, and you probably seen this on Twitter, social media, is a specific note mentioning of creating a product that can last a 10-year generation, right? Now, if you look at PlayStation consoles, generally they do last 10 years, right? Because they still kind of relevant going into the next generation. This generation is a perfect example. The PlayStation 4 launched in 2013, and yet here we are in 2024, and games are still being made for it. So that's an 11-year gen cycle, right? But what's interesting about, what the Pro does is they did a much better job of adding new technology that gives us a taste or sneak peek what the next generation is about to bring. The PS4 Pro didn't really do that. The PS4 Pro was a more powerful PS4, but it didn't really give us insights on what the PS5 was going to be. We have insight on what the PlayStation 6 is going to be with the PS5 Pro, with the PSSR technology, right? And, better frame rates and stuff like that. But specifically the PSSR technology, right? That's a game changer for consoles. PC already had it with DLSS, but we didn't have an equivalent technology on consoles until now, and PlayStation is bringing that, right? But this all wraps up to what, if you follow my channel for a while, and if you haven't, there's a point I've made on podcasts and, maybe some of my videos, definitely on the podcast, because I mentioned this to the crew, right? Shout out to the crew who's part of the 60 Frames Don't Like podcast, J-Dub, Craig Harris, Extreme, The Judge, everybody that shows up. I mentioned the biggest issue for AAA gaming that we have is games are taking like 5 years, 6 years to make, but the generation, what we consider gaming generation is around 7 to 8 years, right? You're going to see around 2027, gamers are going to already demand, where's the new console? What's the new console? Who's going to release the new console? It's going to happen, right? PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X launched in 2020. You're going to see the vibe and the feeling of, hey, where's the new consoles and stuff like that in 2027, give or take, right? Yet, it's taking 5 to 6 years to make games. That's the big problem in the industry right now. You can't have 7-year gens, yet games are taking 5 to 6 years to make. That's literally just like one game per developer per generation, right? So a developer, let's say, releases a game. Like you could try to stagger it out however you want. But let's say you take one developer. Let's say that developer starts making a game, when the generation starts, right? They got the dev kits, they're learning about it. In 5 years into the gen, let's say 2020. 5 years into the gen, they released their first game, 2025. Boom. Got it. Got a new next gen built from the ground up, next generation game, or current generation game. Got it. Now they're going to work on their second. Well, that second's not going to be ready till 2030. And that's right. And if the next generation starts in 2027, that means the second game is still being made for the previous gen. So you most likely going to get a cross gen if they even bother to even implement technologies of the new console in 2027, and that game's 3 years deep into that gen. You see what I'm saying? The math ain't mathing. Like you can't fit the paradigm. You can't fit games in a 7 year gen, right? So if games are taking like around 5 years to make, and you expect more games to fit in the generation, then there's only two things you can do: reduce the development time of the games, which is most likely not going to be a very big strategy or a very likely strategy. I know AI, they're trying to implement AI to speed up the processes, but there's just some things you're not going to be able to speed up, right? You're pretty much probably going to be stuck in a 5 year gen cycle, right? And don't be surprised if it gets longer. You know, eventually we're going to demand better graphics, 8K, all this weird stuff, and we'll start seeing 6 year, 7 year development cycles, right? But we'll stick with the 5 for the sake of the conversation. So to get two games, that's 5 year development each from the same studio. So if you want expect this one studio, this development team that let's say you love, and you want to see two games, and they make two big blockbuster games, they need a 10 year cycle. They need 10 years to develop two games. So you get two games from this one development team within a 10 year cycle. So they'll start, and when the generation start, then halfway into the generation they begin the new project, and by the end of the generation their second game comes out. You see what I'm saying? Um, if they start their project a little earlier, let's say 2020 starts the new gen. It started right, but let's say they start developing in 2018 or 2017, 3 years. So 3 years before the new consoles come out, they started, and then the consoles come out, and then 2 years later their first game come out. Okay, but chances are the games are cross gen. But let's say it's not. Okay, 2022, you got their new game. Got it. Now they're about to develop another game. It's not coming out till 2027, which is pretty much the end of the gen. You see what I'm saying? So that's something the industry's got to figure out, right? And if there's, especially with the consoles now, x86 instead of Power PC, like the PS3, the previous consoles, I think, you know, Sony might be prepping the whole generation thing, or at least they're probably ready to extend the generation, right? And which is why they beefed up the PS5 Pro to this level, right? Um, because the console's coming out in 2027. Oof, you know what I'm saying? The main thing is, how is development studios going to keep up? You know, unless they start making indies. But then we're not going to accept that. Come on, we're not going to accept majority of the games that they decide to make are indies or double A's or single A's that take 2 years to make whatever. It's just not. The industry is a very triple A driven industry, and that's because the game is said so. When you see some of the biggest, most of the games are triple A that they sell, right? That's just the reality. Not saying that there aren't indie games that aren't breakout hits once in a while, but those are once in a while. That's not the norm. It doesn't happen all the time. So could Sony strategies like, you know what, we're gonna with the PS5 Pro, it's gonna be a beefy system, right? And of course, you got a lot of haters now, right? They're all talking trash. We don't see nothing. That's just haters. It's stupidity and nonsense. Still $700 PCs, right? As soon as this comes out, right, I have no doubt it's gonna smoke check, right, the PS5 and Xbox Series X. It's not even gonna be close. Anybody who thinks it's close, you're just a moron. You're probably an Xbox fanboy, or PC cuck, right? And it doesn't matter. You get your guys' opinions is irrelevant, right? The majority of gamers are gonna see like, wow, right? You know, and you may not get a PS5 now, PS5 Pro now, because you may not feel the need to, right? Right? But chances are you're gonna have this itch around 2026, right? And if Sony doesn't release a new console in 2027, 2028, and we start figuring out, hey, Sony's extending the generation, right? Because they have this powerful platform, the PS5 Pro, which means now they have more time to really focus on the next generation, more powerful hardware, slower. They're not rushing a new console just to rush out a new console, especially when there's really no more competition, right? I mean, Xbox They're really floundered. It's just what it is. That brand just went to dog trash, right? It's dog shit now. They really punted in stands. They're putting all their games on PlayStation, stuff like that, right? I mean, now you got them to the point where they're just, the CEO of Microsoft has no problem saying the words PlayStation now. Before they used to like kind of hide it, like other devices and other places to play. Like they were very ambiguous, but we knew what they were talking about. Now they're just outright saying PlayStation, Nintendo. They're not even hiding it no more, right? So that's along, so there's no competition there. Nintendo does their own thing, and it's gonna be another handheld that's like 1080p, some weak shit. Really, it's nothing. They got, the community, the Nintendo community loves it. It's gonna be successful. It's gonna sell a lot, but that platform selling a lot has very little impact on PlayStation, right? Like take now, Switch has 134, 140 million, handheld sales, right? Has any PlayStation gamer ever have any of us in the community say, "Oh man, Nintendo got third-party deals locked because they have the biggest, market or whatever, and now PlayStation can't get any of these games." Like, no, it like Nintendo doesn't impact PlayStation any other way, in any way whatsoever, even with 140, million units. It's like irrelevant to us, you know. So you see what I'm saying? So with that, I think Sony's able to help shape the industry, right? By not rushing generations, right? Give developers more time to make their games, while at the same time satisfy gamers with more powerful hardware within the console space, right? Without having to jump to a whole new generation, which now pushes developers to now learn a new architecture when they only really made like one game. If they're lucky, they made two games during that generation, right? Got to give the developers more time to make games. So something's got to give, right? Because 5-year games and 7-year gens, that's not going to work. It's simply not going to work, right? Generations are most likely going to be extended, right? And if it isn't extended, let's say they still keep with the 7-year model, maybe 8-year model, right? Because they might do that, right? Because the gamers demand new consoles. We got to have the PlayStation 6 in 2027, 2028, or we got to have the new Xbox or whatever, right? Then all you're going to get is cross-gens. Get used to cross-gens. You're not, there's just no way in 2028, right out the gate, the industry's going to be like, all right, drop PlayStation 5, drop everything, go straight to PlayStation 6. Ignore, If you think it's bad now with the PlayStation 4, you get ready for next generation. You're going to see cross-gen like 4 5 years deep into the PlayStation 6 gen. It's going to happen. They're not going to drop that because, again, they got to make their money's worth, right? They learn all these tools. They learn all these technologies. And now they're going to move on to the next generation technologies with only making one game. No, they're going to make their games. They're going to get their products out, right? They're going to get the most out of their investment. And if that means, deeper, longer cross-gen games, that's what they're going to do. So one way or another, we're going to have PlayStation 5 generation for a while, right? Even with the PlayStation 6 comes out, let's say if they do release in 2027, those games are cross-gen. And it's going to be cross-gen in 2027, 2028, 2029, because they're going to get their money's worth off of the investment they put in to make this current gen of games. They're not going to just be like, all right, with the technologies we'll learn this gen, just make one game. All right, next generation starts. Make one game. Nah, they're not doing that, So interesting article, just interesting viewpoint. But you let me know what you think. Hit up the comments section. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. Please hit the like button. I truly appreciate it. And if you're new, I have a podcast, 60 Frames No Lag, every Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. Hope to see you there. You guys take care. Your only friend is YouTube Streets, Puerto77, and I'm out of here. Peace. Grand opening